Hi, I'm Teresa from Creativity Lane. Today I want to show you how to make an upholstered headboard for a day bed. This is a fairly simple process. You'll be needing wood, foam, your fabric, a staple gun, and some wadding, and a few hand tools. You really don't have to have a pneumatic staple gun. I just use it because it's quick. It drives in staples into hardwood, but if you use plywood or a pine, you can easily just use a hand staple gun, and it's a project that'll take you no more than 2 hours. I'm using particle board, which is an MDF, but you can use a coarser particle board. I'm only using a 19 or a 9mm board because it's going to go against a wall. You don't really need anything stronger than that. If the headboard is going to be standing on its own and people are going to be resting against it, say for instance in front of a window, I suggest you go for a 20mm at least. A nice plywood would be strong enough for that. I'm using a 50mm foam, just a medium density. You don't need a high density, it's not a seat, it's just a backrest, so medium density is fine. And the wadding I'm using, you can just wadding, batting, I don't know what they're called everywhere else. Just an ordinary cover to cover your foam once we've stapled it down to give it a smooth finish and it doesn't make any wobbles or funny dents in the fabric. In terms of fabric, try and use a fabric fairly plain if you could, if you don't want to trouble yourself with pattern matching. I've just got a plain upholstery fabric, nice and thick, and the reason for choosing a plain fabric is that you can turn your fabric sideways, cut the strip off that you need, and there's no joins. You don't have to worry about the pattern being straight and square. You don't have to join the fabric, but your normal fabric is only 140 centimeters wide, and the headboard is usually wider than that, other than a small single bed. And when you have a pattern, you will have to join the patterns up, make sure you don't see the seam, and some people just don't have a sewing machine. So with this, you don't need a sewing machine. If you choose a nice thick upholstery fabric, plainish, you can turn it on its side and it's an easy job. Right, so you've cut your shape. You don't have to cut it. I do have a jigsaw. Freehand draw your pattern or the shape that you want, cut it off, and that's it. So for this one, I'm going to show you the short end of my day bed. The day bed I'm working on is sitting in a corner against a wall. I'm having one long end for the long side of the bed and a shorter end, the shorter side for the short side of the bed, and I'm going to show you the short side. The longer side will be a precise, exact repetition of what we're doing here. It's just easier on a small piece or a small scale to show you. So I've cut it. I have placed the pattern on top of my foam, traced it, cut it, and you can just use any old knife with a little bit of a rasper edge. If you have a bread knife, electric bread knife, brilliant. You use that, cut it vertically when you cut the foam, place it on top of your board. Now you can see my foam is not long enough to cover the whole thing, but the piece that came off there at the top, I just used that to add to that little piece. You don't see the join. If you really want, you can glue them together, but for a headboard, not necessary. Now first of all, to create that little rounded bit at the top end of your bed, my method, now there could be many other methods, my method is to fold or force the inside of the foam towards the inside of your wood. So you take that bit, press it in, fold it over, and kind of force it with your thumbs so it goes down. And you're going to tack it down right on that edge. What that does, it creates that soft, nice, rounded tummy, if you want, and it just gives a nice smooth effect, and your wadding will go right over. And this is my best way of getting a nice smooth professional look out of it. So let me show you how to do that. You're going to press that in on the side. The first few staples, you've got to kind of hold it with your other hand because the foam wants to pull it out. So the moment that you put more in, it's going to do less of that. And another thing, what's nice when you do that, your staple, I'm using a 12mm staple, doesn't have to go through the whole length of the foam. It only catches the first bit of it. So there's not a lot of tension on the foam to, to come off again. See that nice rounded shape? Beautifully done, very easy technique. If you do make a mistake and you have to take a staple out, I have modified, you do get staple removers and such, but I just use an ordinary screwdriver. I've bent it to a little angle like that and grinded out two little edges so it gives me a nice little hook to unhook it, and this kind of leverage it, out to get the staple out. So that's my trick. Lift the staple up, and then I'm using a normal pliers that I've just grinded a little bit so it's not as sharp. You don't want to cut the staple out, you just want to pull it out. So I find that this works best. So it's a really easy and cheap trick. Right, now that you've done that, you can see it's beautifully curved. I've went all around the side edges to the bottom. This tall side is going to join in a corner with the other side of the headboard. So that shaping it like that helps it to make a nice tight clean join when we join it up later. I'm going to now put some wadding around it to finish it off even better, give it a nice smooth edge. If you staple on the one side, go all the way over to the other side, stretch it, especially with fabric, so that it tensions it nicely. You already get straighten it up, and don't just do one by one. Go directly to the other side, tension it and tack it down, and then you can fill in the middle. Now for this, I'm quite used to the staple gun. I don't really have to look under. I feel it with my thumb. But if you're new to this, I prefer you turn it up like that, and then look where you staple. I will do this for the demonstration. So once you've done one side, directly across, the other side is now your next step. So that again, you can tension your fabric. So you'll tension it, you'll pull it over, and then you'll tack it there at the back. Like I said, come over to the other side, pull it, make sure it's nice and tight. Right, so you've done that. Trim the excess of your wadding off. We don't want this excessive bulk at the back. There you go. And there's your piece ready for the fabric. Right, we've got the fabric on. The same principle, you're going to start on one end, stretch it, pin it down on the other end, staple it down, move over to the top and stretch it over. Make sure that you've got plenty to go over on the sides. And again, if it helps, especially for the first bit, you can turn it over and fill in the rest. But you can see it's nice and tight, straight. Right, so now that we've got the first bit on, you can see this fabric has a little bit of a, if I could call it, grain, but how it's been made, it's got a little bit of a line to it. So you just want to, where you start, make sure that the first bit is nice and straight, the lines don't go crooked. If there's any weave that you could see, I can see a weave, so I'm going to tap the first one, and it helps if you use your flat hand to move the fabric on and grab it on this side with a flat hand as well. So like that, put it down, make sure it's nice and straight with a side edge there, help it, hold it flat with your one hand, and then tack it behind. Go over to the other side. Now you want to do the same thing, stretch it this away and that away. Right, so now the fabric is flat, it's happy. You can now tilt it up. So you're going to tack this down now. I use my flat hand again, pull it all up, and that's when you can really see if there's any funny bumps or any funny business happening at the top. You can also keep a consistent tension on the fabric. Right, have a look and see that you're all happy with that. So on a curve like this, you'd notice that the fabric is going to start pull in all sorts of directions. It doesn't want to go around curves, so you've got to help it a little bit. What I normally do, because it's such a big piece, I first of all just trim it off so that it's not such a big piece to work with. You'll notice that immediately it gives you a little bit of slack. And then the second trick to get it around this corner, to help it a little bit, is to make small little incisions in the fabric, but don't get too deep. You want to still keep the integrity of the fabric, so you're going to cut it a little bit to ease the fabric around the bend. So now you can see it's going to do exactly what I want it to do. Right, so make sure our weave is still nice and straight. What I now do, I go to the deepest part of the curve, give it a nice stretch, fold it over, so I know I can tack one over there. And then a little bit to the outer side. We'll fill this in a moment. Then you can go back and do this side. Right, so at this point you are done, your headboard's finished. You cover the back with a piece of plain fabric. I normally just use Spun Bond, and put it on your wall. You can use 2 wooden legs to support it. You can put brackets on your wall, any way that you want to fasten it. I will show you how I'll do it when I do the install later. For this headboard though, I'm not going to just stop at that. The bed sits in a position where you can a little bit see the back of the headboard when you sit on that side, and for that reason I can't just cover it with a piece of black. It will just not look finished. So I'm going to put the same fabric on the back, and I'm going to bring it over, staple it on the front edge of the headboard, and I'm going to cover it with a nice silver trim. You can do piping if you want. I'm going to use this silver studs, and I think it's just going to make it look really finished and tailored. So when you staple it on the back end, you've really got to make sure that you come right to the edge of your wood and give it like a little track where your staples will run over. The strip studs will cover all the staples nicely. You've just got to make sure that you keep it nice and even to the edge of it. See that? Right on the edge, it gives it a nice little lip. And what I always do, you take one, then you do the other one, so that you can tension your fabric. Give it a little bit of a stretch. Now as you can see, I use my finger as a guide just so I can kind of see where I'm going. And then you run your staples all along the edge. We will trim it and then put the studs on. Now that you've stapled all along the edge there, you take your fabric and you cut it nice and close to your staples. Right, so right on that lip that you've just created with your staple gun, place your strip studs down, covering your staples, and every 4th one has got a little hole in where you would put your loose little stud in and nail it right down. And with this you go all around the edge where you've stapled. And there you have it. It's beautifully done, covers the staples well, looks amazing. This trim just makes the headboard look so much more custom and tailored. I really like how this came out, and I think you would love seeing the completed look once the other panel is on. So if you want to see that finished and see what the room looks like at the end of the day, I will leave a link in the description so that you can check that out. And if you found this tutorial helpful, you know the usual thing everyone asks to do: like, subscribe and share. And I'll see you back here next time. Tell me if this was helpful for you down below in the comments. Thanks for watching.